And we are back once again. Spin Cycle. Andrew Southwood with you, RC Williams as well. Glad to be here today on this day of production. This is a Tuesday, August 11th. I believe we're at episode 18 by now, so moving right along. Got a few news and notes for you here today. Some looking under the hood of some of these headlines for you, if you will. So and I know both RC and I are a little bit compacted, so we're going to get right to it today. RC, story number one:
Oh
Trump
boy, here we go.
approval rate. Yeah, I know, right? Trump approval rating is at an historic low. What you see here, let me bring this up. Hopefully, that's a little bit bigger for you there. You see here, this is from Pew Research. Presidential approval in the summer before the midterms. And you'll see here you have every president except for George H.W. Bush, who did not have a second term. So this is only comparing presidents that had two terms. You see Reagan's first term, 42%. His second term, he went up to 63. So people liked him even more in his lame duck. The same thing happened with Clinton, and that was largely because of the Republican Congress and Senate that balanced the budget and trimmed government and his triangulation in term number two. George Bush W, 43, the opposite, 65%, largely fumes of 9/11 and that initial response. Then, of course, you had TARP, and all of a sudden, you had this constant drumbeat of the media calling him Satan and Hitler, and no surprise, he's at 36%. Now, that was, even up till now, the lowest presidential approval rating in modern record before a midterm. Then after that, that gave way to Obama, and the years that you see next to him are the midterm years. So their
Right.
election year would have been 2 years ahead before. So Obama would have been elected 08, 2010 is his midterm year. 47 and 44 stayed basically the same. Trump, then you had a 40% in 18. Biden, then 37 in 2022. Trump this year, 34%. I've got a couple of pieces that I think are playing into this, but RC, what do you think are playing into Trump's really it's an historic low approval rating. And I'm not saying this to dance on the fact that people don't like him, because I think it bodes very unwell for the midterms for conservatives. I don't really see the only party that will platform a conservative, at least a little bit, is the Republicans. And it's the Republicans that are going to pay the price for this. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. So I think there's two sides to it, though. Andrew, one, you take all polls with a grain of salt, right? You have to, because then you look into how it was positioned, everything like that. Now, Pew has done this over the years, obviously. But I think the other thing, too, here is all of this has been such a hard sell for the administration. Like, let's think about what's happened since Inauguration Day in 2025. Most of the stuff has been a hard sell because it's run counter to what the promises were. And when you get into a cycle where you're in a conflict that technically, I guess, isn't a war, but you're in it and you've gotten into it, and now it doesn't seem like you have an off ramp. You're dealing with inflation and prices that are a bit out of whack, and it seems like everything going on just adds to that effect. Um, you have to think that where there's smoke, there's fire with that understanding. I think honestly, Andrew, if you were to sit down with the leaders at Pew and say, listen, when you did the polling, take us inside of the emotions of the people who responded. How did they feel about what they were sharing with you? And I'm sure what you'd hear is there's a real sense of frustration, even from the people who want to be supportive. They just can't, because they're not seeing a correlation between the things promised and the actions needed and the actual deliverables. And not saying that everything has gone down the drain, but
Mm-hmm.
when you the overarching narrative, this is something I shared before with regard to Iran. Like, if you're going to have to sell this in the court of public opinion, just as much as you're going to have to sell it on its face, right? Because you've got to win that battle too. And if you don't, it's going to cause you more trouble than it's worth.
Speaking of Iran, some other little chirpings have begun to emerge. We've heard word both from the transhumanist tech bro globalists, and now the Senate through, or the House and Senate through the NDAA has put in an automatic registration now, where it used to be for a military draft. So this is not a draft, but it used to be that you'd go get your license when you're 16 if you're a male, and
Mhm.
you would have a voluntary registration. technically voluntary, right? They still attach
Mhm.
some penalties if you didn't. But anyway, now that's going to be automatic. You're not going to fill out a form. Our young men, particularly, are going to just be automatically. So you're hearing this draft stuff. Then you're also hearing from the globalists that, well, every young male 18 to 26 should be drafted and should serve. At the same time, we have the combining of our military tech training and knowledge with Israel. Well, Israel has a mandatory draft, at least as far as from what I've been told. I believe they have a mandatory draft.
Yes.
And so you go in anyway. And the problem is what we're seeing, like with this Iran war, and it's weird because you know I like I love classic rock. I love the boomer music, if you will. They did have some great musicians, and but I've always been very I have been very patriotic and supportive of my country, and I thought that early on in my adulthood, I thought those that were dodging the draft in Vietnam and so on, that they were chickens and everything else. And yes, a lot of them were liberal and what have you. But I know there were some that were looking at that war because, by the way, that war did not have congressional approval because, again, as we repeated, there has not been congressional approval on a war since World War II, which means every single one of them has been unconstitutionally carried out. Every single one.
Is
And
it a
then the one,
kinetic action, Andrew? Is
yeah.
that what they call it? Yeah.
And then the ones that we get mired in, like Vietnam, like Afghanistan, like potentially Iran here, you don't want to you I can see how people would say you don't want to they don't want to fight for that. It's not that they don't want to fight for the country. They don't want to fight for that because I can tell you, I don't want to send my sons into this war at all. The answer is no. And I'll do everything I can to fight that. I don't even know what we're fighting for. And which is weird, some of the same criticisms we had in Vietnam, and that does not disparage those who went and sacrificed. I feel terrible that they had to do that at all, to come away with nothing. But you see all this draft talk, and I say all that to show you this. This is a recent clip from Mark Levin's Life, Liberty, Levin on Fox News.
Oh
And
boy.
what's interesting about Mark Levin is I don't know if he's gaslighting Iran or what. He's clearly all for it, and he's talking about boots on the ground and why boots on the ground would be necessary. Check this out. Let me bring that on to
I'll
the
tell
stage.
you what do you got to do here. Yeah.
All right, here you go.
The president has to, people are bringing information to him, and he has to worry about all these things. Now, one other thing, troops on the ground. He said no troops on the ground. I don't remember that in any campaign speech either. But why would we need troops on the ground? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we wouldn't need 300,000 of them. It's this uranium, too. We've got to get the uranium. If it cannot be destroyed, if it cannot be altered, we got to get it. For the reason I just said. You can make dirty bombs, and over time you can still make sophisticated missiles. So you need to get to the uranium. That's why I'm reading in the paper, we're talking about the 82nd Airborne, we're talking about these various special forces and the various military services and so forth. He's not talking about sending regular army and infantry in by the hundreds of thousands. The men he's talking about, the units he's talking about, they are specialized. And you know what else? I remember from my days in the Reagan administration. Many of them are trained for a moment like this to try and secure enriched uranium. Many have been trained for moments like this.
All right, so we hear draft murmurings. We hear boots on the ground, now boots on the ground, and now it's not necessarily to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon, but from having missiles of any kind, so we need the uranium. Is there a shifting goalpost in the stage of the war of Iran? Do you think that, I don't even know where to begin, because again, I don't know what our objective is there. I don't think anybody does, but we don't know what constitutes a win, so we're not sure
Right.
where strategically everything goes, and the goalpost keeps changing as to what our objective there is. And it seems to be increasing in terms of America's involvement, America's support financially. And now we're talking about boots on the ground for uh, specific missions, which of course always are very contained and very short. And it would never be an infantry. I'm sure it would never escalate past what Mark Levin is talking about. I would hope not if that were the case, but I don't know. What do you think? Are we in more of a pickle here than perhaps we even realize?
So I think this is like a multi-layer screw up, right? And I don't know if Mark Levin is late in the information he's getting, Andrew, but we were talking about this back at the end of March. I specifically said this on War Room. I said, because that was the time that they said they were going to deploy the 82nd. Now, having lived in Clarksville, Tennessee for a number of years, I'm very familiar with the 101st and how they deploy. And yes, they are highly specialized for things like this. So that was already done, and those specialists were moved into place, which makes me wonder, since now Levin's bringing it up, if they're already active in the country working to extract the enriched uranium, because that would make sense to send them in as a specialty. In that case, this could all be a big diversion so that they can get the job done and get out. I don't know that I can lend that much credit to it just because of how badly all of this has been handled. But let's look at the multi-tier screw up, right? One, Levin's late on his information. Fair enough. Two, the CIA destabilization specialty did not work well in Tehran, right? It was terrible, right? And here's how bad it was. They couldn't destabilize to the point where, one, they could get regular citizens to arm themselves up, even though they were trying to make that happen. Okay. And then two, every leader that they tried to kill, another one just popped up. Right. So it's like, did you guys not have a contingency for this when you have the greatest movement in the world and the greatest capability in the world to decapitate? So you've got all these different layers, and it's like, okay, look, we're going to position the 82nd Airborne. And I said at the time, I said, when you deploy the 82nd or the 101st, you're staying. Okay, you're planning to sustain for something. So you're going to be there a while if those guys are coming in. And if it doesn't work out for some reason, then you have the next wave that's supposed to follow. But if that's the case, Andrew, my prayer would be that if that's the case, we're very close to getting that stuff out of the country and then this thing is done, if that was the ultimate goal. But back to what you were saying is, what is the goal? How do we know? Are we playing 670,424 D chess? Is this a weapon of mass distraction? Are we running the Chewbacca defense? Like, I'm not sure which one it is, which is probably why the approval rating is as low as it is. But that said, I think that when you understand someone like Mark Levin, he has a burning desire to go in and destroy. That's in his DNA, right? And he hasn't been quiet about that. He really wants that to happen. He's just trying to make it palatable for people to understand how it can happen, so that if they have to put more boots on the ground, everybody will be down with it because he said so.
So do you think then his take is more really coming from his perspective? And I'm not making a judgment. He'll believe what he wants to believe. That's fine. I agree with him on a lot of things when it comes to America. But do you think it's more coming from his perspective, or do you think that this is another little drip in the slow conditioning of America to accept something that we don't want to accept?
Great question. I think that Levin is doing the job for his handlers, right?
Hmm.
And while he may believe that, if he does believe it to that degree, it makes it way more palatable, right? And just the type of personality that he is, I can totally see that, right? So they're like,
Mhm.
hey, we need you to go sell this thing, and with the passion, because you actually believe a lot of this, it's going to come across as genuine. But make no mistake, Andrew, and it doesn't matter which of the outlets we choose to talk about. So many of these outlets and these quote unquote talents or influencers are so heavily subsidized that they don't have to worry about what they say, or if people don't like what they say, or even if they're wrong, because they're making life changing money to do the dirty work, and they're fine with it, right? Which is why they'll come out and do these things, and they'll be even more blatant, because at this point it doesn't really matter. They're insulated against whatever would happen. And a guy like Levin is towards the end of his career anyway, so who cares?
Well, that's a great segue into this next piece. This is an open letter to RFK Jr., Secretary of HHS, and you talk about the handlers, really the handlers of this administration, whoever they are. There's probably a couple of names we might say, and we might be right. One of them, I think, used to hang out with Ron DeSantis in Florida, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, um, you know, I think another one funded the opposition against Thomas Massey to get him unseated. But, I'm just, hey, I don't know.
You're just observing. Yes.
Just observing. Here is an open letter, because I think one of the things that's playing into that, because I don't think that approval poll, it's not just Trump specifically in a vacuum. I don't think any of this is. I think this whole thing is the direction of America, and the fact that the GOP, yes, led by President Trump, are the ones moving all these things along and seem to be on the other side of these issues. But to give you a little bit, this is from an ex-user, Tara. Open letter demanding Secretary Kennedy's resignation. You can go find it on X if you want. I'll read you a couple of pieces. She writes, in August of 24, while everyone was endorsing Trump at your behest, because you deceived them that you were going to hold vaccine manufacturers accountable, I saw exactly what was happening. From the day you led your followers astray and told them to trust the proud, quote, father of the vaccine, you is RFK Jr. here in this case, I knew you had been compromised. I knew that by aligning yourself with Trump, you would only advance Big Pharma's agenda and the medical industrial complex. Even though you swore to make America healthy again, Maha, I knew absolutely nothing would be done about the COVID vaccine or any other vaccine except minuscule pacification tactics, that you would never make manufacturers liable or challenge Big Pharma in any way. I knew it when you took the hard pivot from vaccine accountability straight into Fruit Loops. And she goes on from there. This follows, that's a great line. This follows, though, the Trump administration, President Trump just came out and talked about, sorry, let me get that here.
Yeah.
The Trump administration came out and redid the relaxing the schedule for childhood vaccination. That was the big thing. It's not taking any off the market. It's not really looking at the connection. It's just, well, let's space them out. We still want you to take them, but maybe not all, not at once. And so a lot of the Maha movement were, hey, look at these. Can we actually study the connection between some of these concoctions and things like autism, other issues like that? We certainly know there's connections with myocarditis and fertility issues and all kinds of things. But people feel really betrayed by this, and a lot of, and even the FDA coming out and endorsing the flu shot, and pushing that through. So you have a lot of the opposite. And I do wonder, though, because RFK spent his whole life and made a lot of his bones, yes, on his family name, but also, I mean, he was the guy with Children's Health Defense and environmental and so on and so forth. It does strike me as odd that turn would be so 180 degrees.
I was like, that's good. Valentine's Day.
But why am I hearing something else? Is that on your end?
Yeah, that's on my end.
Okay. But I would wonder if the handlers here, and again, maybe some of the people who we might have referenced a little bit ago, are the ones that are saying you can't touch this third rail, whether it's the jab, whether it's, so go over here and worry about Fruit Loops. Go over here and worry about, trans-saturated monotriglyceride, whatever the heck. Meanwhile, we'll promote glyphosate and expand that, and we'll do all the things. I don't know how much of that is RFK flipping and how much of that is him getting there, because I really believe that he would have made a deal with whomever. Trump made the better deal, so he went with Trump. His supporters went with Trump, that coalition. But, I mean, honestly, if I'm going to put money down, I don't know that the Trump administration, maybe not Trump personally, but I don't know that the Trump administration had any intention ever of following through on anything RFK would have wanted to do, were he to have actual authority in his position.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack. So I'll do the shortest version I can. Here we are again with the weapon of mass distraction, right? And we see this, you have a block of voters in RFK's case. I think we're going to see something similar here in the state of Florida with James Fishback, where they're negotiating for what they want. And they're leveraging that block to get it. This lady's basically pouring out her heart saying, you deceived us. It's interesting when you get there, there's the difference between getting there and getting in there, right? So RFK did what he thought he needed to do to get where he needed to get to. So then he gets in, and then it gets real. right? Because how long did we go through this cycle of who his assistant was going to be? And the litany of assistants that they were presenting for confirmation were all on the wrong side of this. And I think what happens is also there's the influence, right? Because think about who's financing. You're dealing with health, you're dealing with big food, you're dealing with big pharma, you're dealing with big med. They're going to put pressure on you. It doesn't matter how noble your thought process is. You'll get pressure applied, and then eventually, if you don't listen, they'll put the screws to you, and they're like, "Here's what you're going to do: go out and do a couple of weapons of mass distraction, so people think they're getting something, and then slide the rest of this stuff through on the way."
And this is right down to Erica Schwartz, the new CDC nominee, who is on record as part of her hearing saying, "Yeah, they're everything's safe and effective." Using the line. I'll give you a quick last word. I know you're up against it. I want to get one more story in before you go.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's move on to this story here. I know that I feel like we're moving so fast away from that, but anyway, I do want to bring this up, and because in all of this, so again, we started with the polls that Trump's has got record low approval rating. We walked through a few ways where people feel betrayed on Iran war, on Maha initiatives and agenda, certainly on the economy. We all feel that. And then also on data centers. Data centers is an across-the-board Republican and Democrat 80-20 issue. This is low-hanging fruit. The Republicans instead have embraced this. That gives the Democrats the open lane to fight against it. Now, they're fighting against it for other reasons, clearly. But here is the what I believe, I'm not going to officially call him the presumptive nominee, but the who we believe will be the Democrat nominee for governor in Florida, David Jolly. Listen to what he says here about data centers. And I think I've got one more with Byron Donalds if we have enough time. But listen to what he says about data centers, because this is another example of the Republicans not knowing how to message, or maybe in some ways not knowing how to campaign, getting on the wrong side, the exact wrong side of an 80-20 issue where they could keep their coalition together, giving it right to the Democrats. And now the Democrat, this clip, if you close your eyes and you don't know who it is, you would think this is somebody running for the GOP nomination. You know? All right, here, listen to this here. I'll put this up. Let me make that full screen for you. All right, here you go.
Not getting any sound, Andrew.
No sound? Oh,
No
sorry,
sound.
hold on. Let me start that again. We'll do that one more time, friends. This time with feeling. Here we go. Let me pull that back a little bit. Here we go. This will work.
Byron Donald's real plan to bring down property taxes is to devalue your house by building a hyperscale data center next door to you. That's exactly what his tax plan is. But no, here's what I'll tell you. And Byron Donalds is doing something that Donald Trump is doing, and every other conflicted politician is doing who's on all sides of this issue now. So big tech wants to come in and bring in the hyperscale data centers. Politicians like Byron Donalds have said, yeah, come on in, build on our pristine lands, give me the money in my campaign account, and I'll let you do it. Voters said, whoa, 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 we don't want hyperscale data centers. And so now the position of the White House and Byron Donalds has pivoted to the following: ratepayer protection. Ratepayer protection is what they're saying to make it look like they're pushing back. Now, understand what that means. That means that big tech and utilities have to pay their own way. They're allowed to plunder as long as they pay for the plundering. Well, voters are saying, we don't want you to plunder. And by the way, paying your own way should have been the baseline. That's not a big reform. That's just because they got caught subsidizing the development of these hyperscale data centers. Now their position is, we're going to make them pay their own way, and they're taking a victory lap as though it's some important consumer protection. No, it's not. Look who's cheering on the Trump-Donalds plan for hyperscale data centers. Who is cheering it on? Big tech and big utilities. Who's against it? Voters. And
yeah, the Republicans could be making this argument and destroying Democrats far and wide across this fruited plain, yet it's the Democrats doing it. And if you're not paying attention, now look, David Jolly has no chance to get my vote, zero. I am not one of the ones, even though I am, yes, dissatisfied with the direction of the Republican Party right now. I'm not going to vote Democrat despite them. I'm not going to vote Democrat as some tool of strategy, because I think that is dumb. I'm going to vote for who I think will do the best job. It may or may not be. Well, it probably isn't Byron Donalds, but anyway. I want to find a Byron Donalds clip that I have. So, RC, I want you to respond to this, because this is just a huge missed opportunity by the GOP.
I believe I'm living in bizarro world. As our good friend Gordon Gekko would say, I'm up to my backside in more nuts than a fruitcake. And yet here we are, right? Where what this guy is saying, because he ain't getting my vote either, right? But think about what he's saying here. He is making the populist argument. He's making the people's argument. And it's funny because David Jolly's a Republican, really. I mean, by all accounts, the only way he can get on the thing is to be a Democrat. So he takes on some of those positions, and there he is, right? But he's actually speaking practically and speaking directly to the pain. And he allowed the other side of this to get boxed into a corner, which in and of itself is a silly mess, right? But I want you to think about something. I want people to think about those in the middle of the road who are still trying to figure out what they're going to do, with them listening to something like this without context and saying, that sounds pretty good. You know what? I like that position. And they make their decision based on that. That's scary.
And listen to this. This is Byron Donalds. This came through James Fishback's X, but it's been reposted several times. Now, here's Byron Donalds' play on bans for data centers.
We got a lot of campaigns running around promising moratoriums and bans, when I know, Jay knows, Griff knows, Shane knows, there ain't no bans coming.
Ain't no bans coming. That's our, so can't beat them, join them, just deal with it. I mean, that's the GOP argument. That, along with, hey, if you're not fine with paying higher prices for gas, you're anti-American, and learn how to make burritos for a family of 8 on $20. This is the Republican message going into the midterms. I wonder why the approval rating is so low.
I mean, that one kind of speaks for itself. And that level of arrogance in under the guise of trying to be practical is just silly, right? But that's someone who already knows they got it in the bag, right? And has enough money that they can just outspend anything that would keep them from getting over the finish line. What should scare people is what happens the day after Inauguration Day next year. Florida is going to go onto a track that other formerly great states have gone through, and we see the results, right? It's like they end up like the equivalent of you using the bathroom before you go on a long vacation and forgetting to flush the toilet and then coming back. That's what it's going to end up looking like, just being as honest as I can, right? And that is summed up in a 10-second clip. And that just the level of arrogance there, and it's a 10-second clip. So look, there could have been context before and after. I'm not saying there isn't, but just the fact that you would say that publicly in that tone, in that way, with that posturing, tells me a whole lot. And don't think that ain't going to get used.
Yeah, over and over
between now and November, over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, you put that together with the David Jolly clip that we had, and David Jolly has his campaign marked down. People are going to want somebody that sounds sane, that's not going along with the stuff that we've been asking our representatives to put a stop to in the first place. All right, we're up and out of time because I know you got to run, RC. So we're gonna break it here, but we'll be back tomorrow on the Spin Cycle. RC, real quick, let them know where they can find us.
Yeah, so guys, thanks for joining us. Culture Crossroads 316 on YouTube for all things Spin Cycle, also Culture Crossroads and Andrew's great commentary. We continue to encourage him, so you need to do the same. His monologues and his one drops are amazing. Continue to encourage Andrew to do those on a regular basis. All things Watchman Action start at watchmanaction.org. We are Watchman Action on all socials, and you can catch the Spin Cycle weeknights at 9:30 Eastern on the Watchman Action Network. That's on Bet Cable Channel 40 in North Dakota, and always streaming live 24/7 at watchmanaction.org, also on YouTube and Rumble.
All right, and as always, thank you for watching. For RC Williams, I'm Andrew Southwick. Wherever you're watching, please like, share, subscribe. Help us grow this channel, this program, and all the programs that we're doing. Thanks again for being with us. We'll see you again tomorrow.